Most women in business squeeze everything they know into 90-second reels and wonder why it feels like they're constantly talking but never really being heard. My guest today started a podcast in the middle of her own transformation before she had it figured out, before her brand was polished. And the right women found her anyway, because she optimized her content, but because she finally gave her story the space it actually needed. Sophia Graniela is a self-expression and podcast mentor who helps women turn their story into a soul-aligned podcast. And this conversation today is about what it really costs to keep playing small with your voice. There's a version of your brand that doesn't need to be pushed. It pulls. I'm Judith K. Ritz, founder of the Spirit Brand Academy, and this is the Magnetic Brand Podcast. Every week, we go deep on what actually makes a brand magnetic through human design, astrology, and archetypes. In solo episodes and real conversations with women who've built something that feels like them. Let's get into it. And I'm super excited to have you here. My first guest in my podcast, it's episode 4, and you're a podcast mentor, and you really embody and teach that to just start messy, don't be perfect, and, just do it and get better along the way. So I'm super excited to have you here. And I would like to dive right in with the first question that I have for you. And that is, what is one thing that women get wrong when they think about starting a podcast?
Oh my gosh. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the beautiful introduction. And I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation. Congratulations on your podcast launch. The one thing that I think a lot of women get wrong with podcasting is they focus way too much on two things. Number one is the obsession with the metrics and the numbers and thinking that they have to focus on getting all of the downloads. Or the second thing is needing to be an expert or sound like someone that they are not. And when I say that, if you are an expert in something, that's incredible, but you do not need to be an expert to start a podcast. You can actually use it as a platform for creative self-expression, for sharing your story, your lived experience, your wisdom. And that will build such a deep level of self-trust, not only within yourself, but with your community as well.
Sounds amazing. And I know this about myself. I don't know how your experience is, but many times we think of saying something or writing something, and then we're like, no, can I really say this, And then we keep editing and not actually saying the truth that we want to share. So, yeah. And that's also the reason why I actually started my podcast, because I really felt this. Instagram is such a small bubble, and you have only this short form content. But, we have so many interesting conversations also like outside with friends or other business owners when we talk about building your brand, human design, showing up authentically or with your frequency. Really amazing, interesting conversations. And they just don't fit into a 90 seconds on a 3-minute reel, It's like not the right platform. And that's why I was like, okay, I need to start my podcast now. Now is the right time to do that.
Yes, you said it so beautifully. So many women are so multifaceted and multidimensional. And as you mentioned, we travel, we have these beautiful conversations, we have these aha epiphany moments, and then we try to water it down and shrink it to fit into a 90-second reel or a carousel. And then we feel this frustration that it didn't land with our audience or that the right people didn't get the message. And I think podcasting is that beautiful space and platform that can actually hold our depth.
Yeah. So what was like the moment for you where you said like, okay, I'm still in the middle of my own process, but I want to go public now?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. This was about a year and 4 months now. I've had her journey home. But before that, I was on my sobriety journey, which really cracked me wide open. And it sent me on this challenging and beautiful self-discovery journey of relearning who I was underneath all of the fears and the traumas and the limiting beliefs. And I had started sharing my story on Instagram. And I remember the first time I ever posted a reel, I was terrified. I felt sick to my stomach. I thought, oh my goodness, what if people from my high school see this? What if people judge me or perceive me in a certain way? And once I pressed post on that first post, it unlocked something in me. And I realized, wait, I survived. Everything's okay. I can share my story. And so I did that for a while. But there was a moment in time that I just thought, I have so many stories. I have so many perspectives. I have so much that I want to share about the experiences I have navigated. And I can't quite possibly fit these just on Instagram. And I just felt that frustration and that annoyance of, I know that I'm meant for a deeper space and platform. And so, yeah, a year and 4 months ago, I launched Her Journey Home. And within the first couple of episodes, I just knew in my body that this was my space. I felt such a deep connection. And it was very scary at first, opening up about the deeper layers of my story. But little by little, every single week, I just started building more confidence and conviction. And I thought, wow, our stories and our voice hold so much power. And when you actually give your voice a space to exist, it shifts something on such an internal level, and then everything around you begins to shift as well.
Amazing. So with this, you also answered the next question. I wanted to ask you, like, if the podcast changed something in you, but you just answered it so beautifully. So it was really accompanying you in your whole process, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it shifted so much. I mentioned the confidence, of course. Also, the way that I showed up in my own business, the conviction in the value of my offers and what I actually had to offer the world, my natural gifts. And I think something else that it really shifted was allowing me to connect deeply with my authentic self expression. Because for many years, I looked at other women in their expression and I thought, well, that's not really me. That's not really how I express myself. And I would always judge myself and shame myself. Well, I'm not frolicking through a field, or I'm not dancing in this way, or this isn't the way that I express myself. And then when I started podcasting, I realized, oh, I'm meant to speak. Speaking and sharing and storytelling is my form of authentic self expression. And it allowed me to reconnect to the parts of myself that I had quieted for so many years. I was always told, you're too much, you're too loud, you're too annoying. And I took that on as truth for most of my life. And so podcasting gave me that space to take up more space and to be loud and to be too much. And I slowly but surely started to fall back in love with those parts of myself.
Amazing what you say, that you have the stories. And we, before we started recording the episode, we talked a little bit about human design. And, and of course, I looked at your human design chart and I can see you're a manifesting generator like me. So that means we need to use our defined throat center, for videos, for podcasts. So this is like our booster, let's say like this. And also you have the storytelling channel. So surprised that you even said that, that you like to tell the stories and you tell your own stories. So yeah, I can see this clearly in your chart. Oh, that's
Thank
amazing.
you. That's so exciting. I always love hearing about human design because ever since I learned that I was a manifesting generator, everything started to click for me because most of my life I was very multi-passionate. I like to explore different hobbies and I've had so many iterations of business. And I used to have a lot of shame around that until I learned I was a manifesting generator. And then it all made sense. And I think for the Manny Gens listening to this episode, podcasting is such a great space for you to be able to, again, use your throat chakra and share your story.
Exactly. And, and the way how the podcast was like your tool that you found to really reconnect with yourself and find your way of expressing yourself. This was actually really what human design and the archetypes was for me. How long ago was that? It's 6 years ago already, So that was the aha moment for me where I was like, oh man, now I understand myself on a much deeper level. Now I know, like, I'm not wrong. I'm not broken. I'm right the way I am. And now I can show up the way I am and be also more compassionate with myself. And once I knew this, and I had these huge aha moments, also of course for my branding, my marketing, how to build the business. It feels really like, okay, now this is what I want to send out in the world. Women need to hear it, and it goes deeper than just like, okay, you're a manifesting generator, so you're multi-passionate, so you can have the most diverse business. No, this is just like the top layer. We can go so much deeper when we really fully understand ourselves and then know what's our message. And also, so funny talking about message. Message is actually like your innate brand message is actually commit to something, commit to saying yes. It fits so perfectly what you do. Like, okay, say yes to launching your podcast and then just roll with it. So yeah, amazing.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I think a lot of times people think that they need to have all the perfect setup and the lighting and the microphone and all of these things. And for the women listening, I started with a $40 microphone on my apartment floor in Miami. And I had no idea what I was doing. I was podcasting with a friend before that. So I had a little bit of information, but I had never used Riverside. I had never used certain platforms, and I was really new to doing it on my own. And so when I launched, I just allowed myself to refine over time. So just allow yourself to start somewhere and you will grow and evolve from there.
Exactly. Amazing. Thank you so much for giving me the permission. Also to
Yes.
being here, in my outdoor jungle podcast studio in Costa Rica, which I think is also pretty unique for a podcast.
So incredible. I love it.
Oh, yeah, no. So the next thing is definitely a really super professional microphone so that also the audio is super crisp outside here.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question I have, I mean, you answered already, like what is stopping most women from starting their podcast? But what is it really that what do women lose when they really try to only squeeze all their content into this short form and just like focus on one platform like Instagram or Facebook or TikTok?
Yeah, I'm going to give this a two-part answer. So there's actually, I think, something else that stops women from starting podcasts and using their voice. And I think that is the conditioning from a very young age, both in our childhood and in the society. Because as women, we have been told to be polite, to be more quiet, to take up less space. And then in childhood, if women were not able to express themselves in a safe environment where it was welcomed, we become more shut down. We become more quiet because it doesn't feel safe for us to use our voice and to share what is on our heart. So I think that is actually really what drives a lot of this behavior with women and being scared to even launch a podcast is because of that fear of rejection and judgment. And are we even allowed to do this? So I wanted to preface that. And then also, I think for women that are just on Instagram or just on TikTok, I think it's a really great place to start there because if you are still really scared of being seen, Instagram is a great space to start posting stories and to start doing reels and carousels and just getting a feel for sharing your story. But there will come a point in time where you feel the need to expand. You are ready to share more of your depth. And I just don't think that staying on Instagram is the most beneficial because you have other platforms that you can then spread your light on and share your message. And when you can share the more vulnerable pieces of your journey, you can share the deeper parts of your story, people will actually really trust you even more and they'll be able to feel so seen and heard and held on their own journeys of transformation. Because again, I think so many of us as women struggle and suffer in silence because of the conditioning. And so if you are able to share your message on a deeper level, women will be able to resonate and know that they're not alone on their journeys anymore. And I think that's also the power of podcasting. Instagram is amazing. It'll reach certain people, but I think being on a whole nother algorithm with podcasting and being able to spread your message even wider and reach even more humans, why would you not?
So true. Amazing. And you call your podcast Soul Aligned. So, like, what makes the difference between having a soul aligned podcast and between having well produced podcast?
Yeah. So I'll give you my little definition. For me, when I think of podcasts, oftentimes there's the podcasts that are happening with very successful people already, right? Like they've already reached their level of success. They're teaching you, they're motivational podcasts, and they're almost speaking at you. And maybe they're bigger produced podcasts. Maybe they're just very like perfectly polished, put together podcasts. And there's nothing wrong with that. We need those. And I listen to some of them myself. However, a soul aligned podcast is the women that are sharing the depths of their soul, their stories, their wisdom, their lived experience. They are talking about the messy parts, the raw parts, the real parts. And you get to feel the human behind the microphone. I think that's the biggest distinction is when you listen to the podcast, you can feel yourself in their stories. You feel seen. You feel like you're a part of that conversation and it doesn't feel so perfect and edited and proper. It's one human or two humans, if it's like us two having a conversation of just sharing about their own journey and their own lived experience. And it comes from a place of really wanting to serve and make an impact. And I think that would be the biggest distinction between the two podcasts. They can both have an impact. They can both be very powerful, but the soul aligned really brings the human online.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Less teaching, more connecting, right?
Yes, exactly.
So I'm interested in how did it happen for you or how did your brand evolve? I mean, when you started out, you didn't start out and had the idea like, okay, I become a podcast mentor. So
No.
like what was that evolution or I don't even want to call it pivot, even though it is a little pivot, but I think it was a natural evolution for you maybe. But you want to share a little bit about this?
Definitely. I love this question because, yes, it was definitely a very natural evolution. I started out about 3 years ago doing sober curious coaching, or actually 2.5 years ago when I got sober. And I started sharing my story on Instagram. I just started doing face to camera videos and sharing about how I stopped drinking alcohol and my journey with ayahuasca. And I just naturally started sharing my story. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I was terrified of being seen. I was so scared of showing my face on camera. I was scared of being judged and rejected, but I just kept going and showing up. And about maybe 6 months to a year into talking all about sobriety, I reached a point in my own journey where I realized that I didn't want my entire identity to be around sobriety. It felt like that was all I talked about, all I focused on, all I could think about 24/7. And it served me at that season, in that season of my life. But as I continued to evolve and I continued doing inner work and I learned about EFT tapping, which I'm also a practitioner in, I realized that I no longer wanted to just be in a box of sobriety. I still wanted to share my story. I still wanted to talk about how sobriety has changed my life, but I no longer wanted to be confined to that little space. And so little by little, I started to talk about rebuilding in my 30s. And I started talking about EFT tapping and coming back to myself and really how I was building confidence in my voice. And then I launched my podcast, Her Journey Home. And throughout that entire process, I remember it being a really natural process for me. Even though I was scared, it felt like home. I loved sharing my story and the deeper parts of myself. I loved having women on from all walks of life to share their stories. And I remember about 30 episodes in, I kept getting comments from women telling me, "You're so good at this. How are you such a natural?" And I finally started clocking it. And I thought, why do I keep getting other certifications and I keep taking other programs and I keep looking for answers outside of myself when the answer is already within me? I already know what I should be doing. And so about 3 months ago, the voice kept getting louder and louder. And I kept hearing, "Sophia, you need to start helping women with podcasts." And I had so much imposter syndrome. I was so scared because podcasting can be a long game and people have been podcasting for 8 years, 10 years. And I kept hearing the voice of, "Who do you even think you are to do this?" But I have such a unique spin on it because I'm not a podcast growth strategist. I'm helping women build confidence and conviction in their voice and their message and tapping into their authentic self-expression and sharing their story with the world and making more of an impact. And I thought, well, I'm doing that and I love what I do. And it's changed my life on such a deep level. Why would I not share my gifts with the world? Like that would actually be selfish of me not to share. And finally, I just one day thought, I'm taking the leap. I'm going to claim this. I'm going to announce it. And it's been such a beautiful journey. It's just all fallen so beautifully into place. And I feel like I finally have connected to my calling.
And you know what else you did? You really used your strategy of responding as a manifesting generator, so you responded to the signs and the questions on the outside. So yeah, that's perfect. That's exactly how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking like how it was for me. Like, I have friends that also run their own business, or I know like who was like some women that were peers in back in I don't know 2019 to 18 20 in coaching programs, and back then they already started their podcast. For me it was always like, "Bah, man, no, that sounds like such a big project to start my own podcast. I'm not ready for that yet." It just sounded so overwhelming, so I was like, no, it's not the right time now. But then in when was that? That was middle of March. We had a business women network meeting here in our area. One of my very good friends and I, we started this because we wanted to connect with women in the area here, to support each other, learn from each other, with each other. And so on the last meeting we had middle of March, after this was like, bam, I need to host my first retreat. That was my first download that I had, also like retreat is in my head for like months already, or even like 2 years or something like this. But also it was like so big, so overwhelming. Then it was just like, no, I need to do it next year, February. Okay, I set the date. And then the second download on the same day was like, okay, I want to start my podcast. I want to build an ecosystem, get out of the little Instagram bubble and share more, spread more, the word, the stories, and also interview amazing women and to really hear what's the story behind their brand. How have they evolved? How have they started? How did they arrive where they are right now? And that
Absolutely.
leads me to my next question. Like, how has it changed? Like starting a podcast, how has it changed who shows up in your world, or what kind of conversations you have, what kind of clients you have? I mean, now you've pivoted. I mean, now you mentor women in starting um their own podcast. How was it before? Like when you started your podcast originally, did you also use that for business? Like, did you have a program, a mentorship that you were selling as well? You really just used it to just heal and to just accompany you in your process. And only now, a couple months ago, when you started mentoring for the podcast, you also attract clients with this, or how did this change?
Yeah. So I started the podcast really to help with my own integration process on my sobriety journey and my healing journey. And I was also doing sober curious coaching. So I would have little CTAs in my podcast episodes, but there was always a disconnection for me because there was always something for me in my old business that was missing. I knew that I was good at having deeper relationships and conversations and guiding clients on their journey. But for me, I wasn't lit up by the idea of sober curious coaching. Of course, women need that support. Definitely. I think being sober has changed my life also in so many ways. But for me, it wasn't my calling. And so what I realized is my sobriety actually just helps me build a deeper connection to my voice, which then led to me launching my podcast. And so things have shifted so much in my world since this new iteration of my business. I have been attracting the most soul aligned, beautiful humans and clients. I am working with some of the most incredible women right now, helping them launch their journeys into the world. And every person that I have attracted, they all have so many gorgeous similarities and through lines of being very soul led, having a mission that is so much bigger than them. They're here to serve and to impact. And getting to help them is my biggest joy in life. Like I get off all of my client calls and I have the biggest smile on my face, and I've never experienced that before. And so what I will say is when you actually answer the call and you are aligned with what it is you're meant to do, and it lights your soul on fire and you're good at it, you will start to have incredible conversations, deeper conversations, more deeper relationships. I think now, even friendships, and when I meet people out in the world, it goes so much deeper than just a surface level conversation. And I don't think I would ever have that had I not started my podcast, because I was able to go so deep within myself. And you can only meet people as deep as you've met yourself. So when you are sharing vulnerably and you're going deep and you're hearing your own voice and you actually have conviction in the value that your voice and story hold, all of a sudden it will be mirrored to you in every way in your own life. And so lots of shifts have happened since I've stepped into this part of my business.
Amazing. Yeah, and I can see this too, like when we go deeper, like in my case with the human designers also, like we have deeper conversations, or when I speak to someone or when I get to know someone, it's like, okay, I'm really curious, what does the human design look like? I want to look at it and see like, okay, yeah, this is what I saw, this is what I felt, this is what I recognize in the
Yeah.
way they move through their life. Yeah, that's amazing. So one last question I want to ask you. So for the woman who's listening and who's been sitting on her podcast idea for like 6 months already, what is one thing that you want her to walk away with from this episode?
I want you to walk away with knowing that it does not need to be perfect. If you are a perfectionist, you have to get really comfortable with the uncomfortable and just starting somewhere. So maybe for you, that is just picking up a microphone and just allowing your voice to flow and sharing one story or conversation that you think someone else needs to hear. This could also be getting clear on who your dream audience is. So instead of speaking to everyone on the internet, think about a past version of you 3 to 4 years ago that desperately needed your message. And anytime that you have a fear or a doubt, think about that version of yourself and use her as your deeper why and motivation to start your podcast. Because anytime that I start to get into a place in my life where I feel like, is this really meant for me? I immediately connect back to her and I cannot leave her hanging, because that version of me needed to feel the support and the love and the hope. And you will become the beacon of hope when you share your story. So what I want you to take away from the episode is It doesn't need to be perfect. You get to just be you. You get to bring all of your magic online and think about the version of you a few years ago that really, really needed your message and go from there.
Thank you so much. And now that you shared this, is sometimes we forget where we came from. Like,
Yes.
it's like we have grown so much that sometimes we forget like the pain we went through, the struggles we had. So, and it's, at least in my case, so sometimes I really need to sit and have quiet moments, like in my hammock or, when I just sit on the beach and stare at the ocean. And then
Yeah.
sometimes my thoughts take me somewhere and I'm remembering like, okay, who was I 5, 6, 10 years ago? What did I need? What kind of
Mhm.
struggles did I have? So if you're also like, if you're listening now and you're thinking like, oh gosh, who was I 5 years ago? What did I need? Just really take your moment and write these things down so you don't forget them. So, and then you always
Absolutely.
have it available for when you want to share content. So yeah,
Yes.
that's what I do. So thank you so much. That was super valuable. And I really hope that now way more women start their podcast like you
Mhm.
did, like I did now. Just start messy and get better along the way. There are a lot of people outside that need to hear your message. And
Yes.
also, if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear this. And leaving a review means more people find the show. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.